Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Cafe DC. In this episode of Cafe DC, we'll bring you another exclusive interview with a congressman who just retired after serving 30 years in US Congress. However, we recorded this interview just before he retired. Congressman Dan Burton is the co-founder of Pakistan Caucus in US Congress. And in this interview, Congressman for the first time reveals some of the aspects of his life which have never been revealed. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Nice being with you.
Why you're retiring at such a young age?
Well, I do appreciate that. That's a wonderful way to start this conversation. Well, first of all, my wife has a genetic heart problem we did not know about, and she's probably going to have heart surgery on her aorta eventually. So I didn't want her to have to go through another difficult campaign. Plus, I'm tired of raising $2 million every 2 years for my campaign. And, you know, in this day and age with people having such acrimony toward government, I'm just tired of everybody being upset all the time. So there's a lot of new young people up here, and I think they'll do a good job.
Congressman spoke at length on a subject which is very sensitive to a lot of people here, not just here, but around the world, the subject of domestic violence. But before we continue, let's watch a report on this sensitive subject.
This is the home where Hank Laird is accused of killing his mother. But according to police and experts, there could have been more son-on-mother violence going on behind these walls.
There were reports that she had actually filed reports for domestic violence, assault and battery, and he was arrested for that.
The light is still on outside the Laird home, like the light now being shed around 17-year-old Hank Laird's potentially violent relationship with his mother.
This is their child that they love and have raised, and when your child turns on you, you know, I think that puts that parent then in a very bad situation.
Police found Linda Laird dead in her home Tuesday, beaten in the head with the end of a shotgun. A standoff Wednesday led to her son's arrest.
Actually, I think family violence is a growing phenomenon in our state and in our culture.
Missy Iskey at Divis agrees this could be a case of parent abuse, the type of domestic violence you hear almost nothing about.
We often see people really feel very guilty about the situation that their kids are in.
And that's why the crime often goes unreported. But Iskey says talking about the issue and being vigilant to the warning signs are crucial in preventing this kind of tragedy.
Well, some of it would be threats, interest in guns and weapons, threats of violence, maybe harming animals, either bullying or being bullied.
Let's continue to watch the interview. Congressman, a long time ago, when I met you along with some Pakistani Americans, you made some comments about your family background and, if I may say, quote unquote, your troubled childhood. And I think it was also very surprising to see you speak about that issue on the floor, on the House floor. I think you're probably the only member who has spoken in so clear terms about his family background. Can you please share some of that stuff with us?
You know, I never really liked to talk about it very much, but they were talking about child abuse and wife abuse on the floor, and I wanted to lend my support to the legislation they were talking about, and that's why I felt that I ought to say something about my background. It wasn't that I liked to talk about it, but I thought it was important. My father, who was 6'8", very tall man, he was very brutal. He beat my mother, he would beat me, and we had a very difficult life. My mother finally decided that she tried to get away from him and she couldn't. She was really afraid of him. So when I was about 12 years old, she finally did get away from him. Came and broke into the house and came in with a shotgun and carried her off. And we didn't know for several days whether she was dead or alive. And I was in the Marion County Guardians Home, Children's Guardians Home, with my sister and brother. And it was a very difficult time. My mother got away from him. After a couple of days, he was exhausted and he went to sleep. And back in those days, you didn't have electric windows. You had to roll them up or down. and he had taken the handles off all the windows except the one on his side of the car. And he fell asleep, and she reached over him in her night clothes, rolled the window down and crawled over him and out the window to get away. And I really think he would have killed her if it hadn't been for that. And then he went to prison, and so I've been very opposed to people who mistreat women and children.
But at the same time, Congressman, when you made the retirement announcement, I was watching one of the videos, you said that you consider yourself as one of the luckiest men on the planet. So of course this is the contrast that you became such a successful congressman. You spent 30 years in this town in Washington. You met kings, presidents, prime ministers, and you were also very close to, I see some pictures on the wall here, with President Reagan.
Yes, he's a wonderful man.
So how do you feel now? Exactly, I said, of course you feel a lot better, but this is a message out there for people.
In some parts of the world, people don't have very many opportunities to succeed. I've been to Africa. I've seen little children starving and mothers starving, and I've seen that those people really didn't have any opportunity in life except to just exist day to day. And there's other parts of the world like that. And I was very blessed to be born in a country where, even though you had a difficult time as a child, you could overcome those things and have a modicum of success in life. And so I always felt like since I was born in America, I was blessed, and I was able to start my own business and then get into politics and get elected to the State House and Senate and then to Congress. And so I really meant what I said. That wasn't just hyperbole. I really think I'm a very, very lucky person. And when I spoke on the floor of the House when I decided to retire, I said, Indiana House, I said, I think I'm the luckiest guy, luckiest man alive. And I feel that way. I've been very blessed.
After you go back to Indiana, you're still going to feel the same way? You won't miss this town?
Well, no, I plan to keep a residence here and in Indiana. And I hope to do some business with companies that are international in scope. They may need some help in figuring out how to negotiate through the morass here in Congress. And there's foreign governments, I think, that probably could use somebody who understands the system up here. And so I think I'd like to do something like that and maybe work on some boards of directors if I'm lucky. And I really believe there's some companies and people and countries out there that would like to have some assistance.
When I first met you, you were actually speaking at a Pakistani-American event.
Yes.
And later you became the co-founder of Pakistan Caucus in U.S. Congress and one of the staunch supporters of Pakistani-American community. So what drew you so close to the community? The values, the...
Well, I think, the Pakistani-American community is a very good community. They're very nice people, and they've been great friends of mine. But the reason I support Pakistan, and I was a co-founder of the Pakistani Caucus, is because Pakistan has been an ally of the United States through thick and thin. We have our differences. There are differences within the government of Pakistan on a lot of issues. But, you don't turn your back on friends just because you have some differences. I mean, my wife and I have differences. She's wrong a lot of the time. But
And you're not.
no, I am a lot. But I think Pakistan has been a great ally when the Russians were in Afghanistan and in a whole host of conflicts around the world. And I think that we need to keep a very strong relationship with them. They're also a nuclear power, along with India, and that's a very hot area over there. And I think it's very important that all of the parties remain friends to make sure we can work out our differences. We don't need another war.
Are you disappointed with the current state of affairs between the two countries, United States and Pakistan?
I'm disappointed in things that are going on here, and I'm also disappointed in some things that have happened in Pakistan. I think there's been some differences between civil government and the military. I won't go into the details, but those are things that have to be worked out within Pakistan. And while they're working them out, I think it's important that we keep a very strong relationship with the Pakistani military and the Pakistani government. And so I will continue to support that relationship.
You've been to Pakistan many times. Yeah. And so what's your impression of the people, the land, the country?
Well, I've been to Azad Kashmir, up in the northern part of Pakistan when the earthquake took place. And I had the opportunity to meet people that we helped a little bit with aid and tents and things like that who are suffering. And I got to know some of the people, and they're very strong people. They believe in their religion, Allah, in my religion, God, and they are very strong people. They're very friendly people, contrary to what a lot of people think. You know, we see radical terrorists, and a lot of people think everybody in that part of the world is like that, and they're not. Most of the people over there are very friendly, and they're concerned about a lot of the things we are. And so I think we need to keep a strong friendship.
If there was one thing that should be changed in this relationship, in this town, what would you suggest?
Well, you know, I think that we need to have a better exchange among legislators and people who are in the educational field. I think it would be great if more Pakistani legislators and government officials would come over here and meet with our government officials and legislators so we had a better understanding of each other. And I think that's true with a lot of countries. And then I think we ought to go over there to Islamabad and Karachi and sit down and get to know the people and get to know the government leaders and talk about our differences. If we do that, not only with Pakistan but with other countries, I think you can start to see a breakthrough that would, I think, lead to an era of good feeling and peace.
Do you think that the corruption is found only in the developing countries? Congressman Dan Burton doesn't think so. But before we continue, let's watch a report on the subject of corruption in the United States of America.
Any words for your constituents?
Last year, Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Vincent Gray made headlines when he was arrested for protesting the city's federal district status that denies residents congressional representation. But when 3 of his senior aides and 2 city council members pleaded guilty to felonies for financial wrongdoing, that made even bigger headlines. For advocates of good governance, it's embarrassing that scandals have erupted just 3 blocks from the White House, but it also shows that not even advanced democracies are perfect. Bill Buzenberg with the Center for Public Integrity trains journalists from around the world to hold public officials accountable.
And this exists here, it exists in other countries, and I think in some ways the journalists I talk to are always amazed that, so this is an issue everywhere, and transparency is an issue everywhere, and holding politicians to account is important for citizens everywhere.
The highly publicized arrest in 1990 of then-Mayor Marion Barry for purchasing and smoking crack cocaine came to symbolize for many the excess and corruption in Washington city government. But D.C. City Council member David Catania says there have been relatively few corruption cases in the last decade, and their prosecution is proof that the rule of law is working.
In the last year, we've had one member incarcerated and another member on probation, essentially house arrest, and an ongoing investigation into the mayor of the city. And so I think this is going to be a great lesson for the next generation of politicians.
Catania does say Washington may be more vulnerable to corruption because the Democratic Party dominates local politics.
When you have a one-party system, essentially, whether it be a Democratic or Republican one-party system, there isn't the watchdog, the internal kind of check and balance that you have through competition that might exist in a rigorous two-party system. I think that definitely doesn't help.
Catania says while more independent oversight and transparency is needed, Washington, D.C. is no better or worse than any other major city in the U.S. Brian Patton, VOA News.
You're chairman of Government Reform and Oversight Committee.
I was, yeah.
Okay, and very important, of course, committee. So what did you see, anything, I mean, this GSA scandal coming up and then, the Secret Service. So that was one of your areas as well, as, as chairman of the committee.
Yeah.
What do you think is wrong with the bureaucracy?
Well, in every government, in Pakistan, in the United States, you're going to have corruption. You're going to have people who take advantage of the system. And the Committee on Government Reform and Oversight, which I chaired for 6 years, is charged with the responsibility of finding out waste, fraud, abuse, criminal activity in every area of government. And it's a big, big job. We've got, millions of people that are involved in government in one way or another. And so when you talk about GSA, There were some things that were done wrong there by some of the supervisory staff, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on parties and trips and things like that, and they need to be held accountable. And regarding the Secret Service, they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. They were down in Colombia, and I understand some other places, and they were dealing with some ladies of the evening, and they shouldn't have been doing that. And so, especially when you look at the security of the nation, because they're there to protect the president or our officials, and if they happen to get with somebody who may be a spy or someone who wants to pass on information that they shouldn't, it could really do damage to America. So they need to be above reproach, and that's why we're looking into all that. We also have what's called Fast and Furious, which is where our government, the Justice Department, was allowing drug dealers in Mexico to get weapons from the United States, and we weren't tracking them, we were trying to catch them, but we were giving them weapons that they used to kill innocent people and to kill some of our border agents. So there's a lot of things that need to be changed, and that's what we try to do with that committee.
Congressman, can I label you or call you a Reaganite, someone who was very close to Ronald Reagan, believed in his philosophy, his ideology?
Well, I think Ronald Reagan, when he started out, was a more liberal person, but as he grew up and he worked for General Electric and did their theater and he went around all over the country, he became very pro-free enterprise and very much against big government. He was a very strong anti-communist. But let me just say this about Ronald Reagan. When he came into office, this country was in worse shape economically than today. People don't remember this, but we had double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates. The economy was going down the tubes, and he came in and said, you know, we're Americans. We're a shining city on a hill, and we can make changes, and we can do what better. And within 4 years, he turned this country around. And in my mind, and he came from my part of the country. He came from Illinois. I'm from Indiana, right next door. And he grew up with the kind of problems that I faced. His father was an alcoholic. He had moved all over the country. I was in 38 states by the time I was 12 years old. We were like vagabonds. He had that kind of a problem. And so I related to him. And he treated my mother so well. I told my mother, when I got elected to Congress, I said, I'm going to take you in the front door of the White House and introduce you to the President of the United States. And my stepfather, who worked in a foundry, and my mother, who was a waitress, they thought, yeah, right, that'll never happen. So when I got elected, I called the President, and I got his secretary, and I said, I told him the story, and I said, I'd like to bring my mother in to meet the President. So they called me back and said, well, he can see you this day. So I had him come out, and we parked the car behind the White House. We walked around to go in the front door. We went in, and we walked in the Oval Office, and Reagan came over, and he put his arm around me, and he said, Miss Kelly, your son is one of the brightest young men we have. And he said, and I know how tough it is when you were growing up. He was growing up. You had to work as a waitress, and Kenny, you worked in a foundry, and I know Danny had the shine shoes. That's me. And it was a very tough time. He says, we went through that too. But he says, isn't it great to be in America? And he made my mother feel so wonderful. And we've got a picture over here on the wall of my mother and my stepfather with us, with me and the President. And she carried that picture with her till the day she died. And one other thing that's very interesting, her favorite actor was Ronald Reagan. Wow. So she met the President and her favorite actor.
Wow.
And he was just a wonderful man. And I think he was a great president.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys very much.
Congressman Dan Burton is a great admirer and fan of President Ronald Reagan. Many people from his generation remember Reagan as an actor in Hollywood, a great actor in Hollywood, rather. Before I leave you today, let's watch a few scenes from some of Reagan's films. Thanks for watching.
Oh, that's hot.
Oh, it's not.
Oh, but delicious. Everything's just right, isn't it, Patty?
Yeah. Well, it's the easiest meal to make. My electric servants do everything.
Well, that's part of living better electrically.
Don't expect too much, Lieutenant. Not on your first day. What's up? See something? It's a plane, all right. But what sort of a plane? Friend or enemy?
You know where McCord's turning them over to, not Chicoa?
Once Nachikoa gets his hands on him, this whole territory will be on fire before night. I guess the boys are just tired. Someday when the team's up against it, brakes are beating the boys.
And in our culture.
Missy Esquiat Divis agrees this could be a case of parent abuse, the type of domestic violence you hear almost nothing about.
We often see people really feel very guilty about the situation that their kids are in.
And that's why the crime often goes unreported. But Iski says talking about the issue and being vigilant to the warning signs are crucial in preventing this kind of tragedy.
Well, some of it would be threats, interest in guns and weapons, threats of violence, maybe harming animals, either bullying or being bullied.
Let's continue to watch the interview.
$2 million every 2 years for my campaign. And, you know, in this day and age with people having such acrimony toward government, I'm just tired of everybody being upset all the time. So there's a lot of new young people up here, and I think they'll do a good job.
Congressman spoke at length on a subject which is very sensitive to a lot of people here, not just here, but around the world, the subject of domestic violence. But before we continue, let's watch a report on this sensitive subject.
This is the home where Hank Laird is accused of killing his mother. But according to police and experts, there could have been more son-on-mother violence.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Cafe DC. In this episode of Cafe DC, we'll bring you another exclusive interview with a congressman who just retired after serving 30 years in U.S. Congress. However, we recorded this interview just before he retired. Congressman Dan Burton is the co-founder of Pakistan Caucus in U.S. Congress. And in this interview, Congressman for the first time reveals some of the aspects of his life which have never been revealed. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Nice being with you.
Why are you retiring at such a young age?
Well, I do appreciate that. That's a wonderful way to start this conversation. Well, first of all, my wife has a genetic heart problem we did not know about, and she's probably going to have heart surgery on her aorta eventually. So I didn't want her to have to go through another difficult campaign. Plus, I'm tired of raising...
Going on behind these walls.
There were reports that she had actually filed reports for domestic violence, assault and battery, and he was arrested for that.
The light is still on outside the Laird home, like the light now being shed around 17-year-old Hank Laird's potentially violent relationship with his mother.
This is their child that they love and have raised, and when your child turns on you, you know, I think that puts that parent then in a very bad situation.
Police found Linda Laird dead in her home Tuesday, beaten in the head with the end of a shotgun. A standoff Wednesday led to her son's arrest.
Actually, I think family violence is a growing phenomenon in our state.